The Edmonton Oilers are back in the conference final as they seek to get back to the Stanley Cup Final, and they'll face a familiar opponent in the Dallas Stars. Nick Zararis of Locked On Oilers is here to talk about that matchup and more coming up on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here, and welcome everybody to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Oilers, Nick Zararis. And Nick, they're back in the conference final. Let's talk a little bit about what it took to get past Vegas, first of all.
Something I didn't think they had in them. I'm just going to be very frank with you. Everything you saw from this group in the regular season, they looked like a second-round exit at best. They really struggled to string together good hockey, especially down the backstretch of the regular season in March and April, where every game felt like pulling teeth because they were missing 4 or 5 guys every single night. And then, as you saw in the first 2 games of that Kings series, when guys haven't played in 2 or 3 weeks, it takes them 2 or 3 games to get back up to game speed. But they played really, really good 5-on-5 hockey. They thoroughly controlled play at 5-on-5. They rolled 4 lines that through 4 games had a majority of the scoring chances, the high danger chances, and the actual goals. So it was really all coming together, and they've really shown a forward depth that wasn't there in the regular season. And the ironic part, of course, is that in the closeout game against Vegas, the 2 marquee free agents they signed the first hour of free agency on July 1st last summer, Jeff Skinner and Victor Arvidsson, they were both healthy scratches. They didn't play in the closeout game against Vegas. So they've really gotten hot at the right time. And if you're an Oilers fan, the thing that's encouraging is there's room to get better here. The penalty kill is still only at 67% through the first 2 rounds, and they've yet to score a power play goal on the road through 2 playoff series. So if you get the special teams to complement the 5-on-5 play, there's still meat on the bone here for the Oilers.
Goaltending always important, and it seems like in the playoffs, the goaltending steps up. Talk to me about that.
Steps up is a polite way to describe it. Those first 2 games were an adventure in the King series. Then they rattle off 6 in a row with Pickard in there. Pickard gets hurt in the game. They lose to Vegas, and they go to Skinner, who loses the game in overtime. They lose the game with 0.4 of a second left, the most agonizing way imaginable to lose. And he comes back with 2 straight shutouts. It helps that they've played really good hockey in front of them, and that's always going to be the Oilers' key to success. As long as their goalie doesn't need to be the difference between winning and losing, most nights their team in front of the goalie is talented enough where as long as they get 900, 905 goaltending, I mean, I think they're at 898 through the first 2 rounds, and they're here. So if they get even marginally better goaltending, they still have a lot of room here to play better than they have. And they've gotten to the conference final only playing 12 games so far.
Everyone knows McDavid, Draisaitl. Give me some unsung heroes that have gotten the Oilers this far in the playoffs.
It's really been a depth adventure. You know, Corey Perry has been remarkable in these playoffs, only playing 12, 13 minutes a night, effectively just stapling himself to the net front, eating cross checks and drawing attention from defenses. Evander Kane getting reinserted into the lineup has made a massive difference, especially on the forecheck, where he's been agonizing for other teams. Him, Hyman, and Nugent Hopkins comprised a really quality second line for a good duration of that 6-game winning streak, where they were just playing the game in a phone booth where the puck was either below the goal line or in front of the net, and it really gave other teams a difficult time. And then you throw in Kapanen, who got them to the conference final with the overtime winner, and Vasily Podkolzin, who was playing 10 minutes a game as a Canuck last year, has chipped in a couple goals playing either with Leon on the second line or in a really sparing depth role on the fourth line. So it's been really encouraging to see the Oilers' depth really step up in a way that it didn't last year.
From an Oilers perspective, what's your biggest concern heading into the conference final?
The special teams haven't been as good as last year, and we play about 75% of an NHL game at 5-on-5, so the Oilers playing as well as they have has offset that. But you look at how Dallas has played so far in the playoffs, where they've largely lost their 5-on-5 minutes, but they have been dominant on special teams, and it really creates a head-on-head disadvantage here, where Dallas is more than happy to give you possession, let you take chances, because they've got a great goalie in Ottinger. You've got quality defensemen in transition and returning Heiskanen and Thomas Harley. So for the Oilers, it's really, can they squeeze more out? And I know that sounds a little crazy to say about a power play that's running at 25% right now, but the penalty kill needs to be better. And if they're going to win this series, they're going to need their special teams to be elite, because Dallas's are.
McDavid, Draisaitl, when do you think you'll see them together, and when do you think you'll see them on different lines?
So to start the playoffs, they were on different lines. That first game against the Kings, and then it got out of hand, and they needed to get back in the game. So they went to Connor and Leon. They lost anyway. Same thing in game number 2. Game number 3, they go McDavid, Draisaitl, Perry, Kane, Nugent, Hopkins, Hyman, and say, we'll figure out the rest. The winning streak goes on. And then until the last 2 games against the Kings, once they got out to the 3-0 lead in game number 5, they juggled the lines entirely. They split them up. They put together a defense first lineup that was really about getting the puck in deep, holding Vegas in their own zone, and really trying to milk clock. And then same thing in game number 6, they slide capping it into the Arvidsson spot next to Draisaitl, and they effectively tell Leon, all right, you're going out there against Eichel. Every time Eichel's out there, we're going to play hard defense, and we're going to win this game on our defense, because we think that's what Vegas is going to go for. Vegas is going to play a very conservative game. So I think to start, you will probably see them split up, but I think that'll oscillate on and off depending on game situation, because when they're in defense first environments, they generally like to split them up to try and get more game control, because if you split them up, you can have the best player on the ice for 20-ish, 25 minutes a game, as opposed to just the overlapping minutes.
Talk to me about the blue line, the defensemen, because we've talked a lot about the forwards. Who are some of the key defensemen that need to be at their best in this series?
So Evan Bouchard's had a really good playoff since game 3 of the Kings series. Those first 2 games, I've largely thrown out of my brain as far as evaluating how the Oilers have played, because they were just so horrendous. But since then, Bouchard has been a lot steadier, a lot calmer. They have gotten the best hockey of Brett Kulak's life at 32 years old. He's playing almost 3 more minutes per game than he did last year. Jake Wallman and John Klingberg have been outstanding as a second pair, which if you told me a month ago would be the case, I would have looked at you funny, because the 10 games Klingberg played from the end of January through mid-February before going on LTIR, he looked like a guy who hadn't played hockey in 12 months. He looked slow. He looked out of sorts, and he's been great. He has been actively good. Him and Wallman together have really given the Oilers a lot of depth on the back end, and they have the wrinkle that Matthias Ekholm should be back at some point in this series, which will push that'll push the last defenseman out of the lineup, Troy Stetcher, who drew in earlier in that series against the Kings, stayed in, and then has drawn in at various points throughout the playoffs so far. So they have the opportunity to get even deeper at another top 4 defenseman, and really have probably the 6th best defenseman, maybe of the entire time of McDavid and Draisaitl being Oilers.
Makes a big difference, no doubt about that. So, Nick, the Oilers win this series if
their star players outplay Dallas's star players. This time of year, it's the big dogs, and Dallas has one in Rantanen, who's had the best playoffs of any forward in these playoffs. And Connor and Leon, by any stretch, haven't been bad, but they haven't been as dominant. They haven't put up as crazy of counting stats the longer the playoffs have gone on. If Connor and Leon can play Rantanen effectively to a push, I feel like the depth is there for them to win on the margins against Dallas. But by and large, and this ties into what I had said earlier about special teams, that's where they need Connor and Leon to get going, is on the power play, because they've had really cold stretches through these playoffs on the road where they go the whole 2 minutes they don't get a single shot on goal. They're too stationary. They're not generating enough looks. They're not making the defense move. They're not making the goalie move. So if you're looking for something to swing the series in the Oilers' favor, look for Connor and Leon to get the power play going again.
All right, Nick, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Locked On Oilers is on all the major podcasting platforms and YouTube. On Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, it's Nick Zararis or Nick Zararis Sports. Thanks so much for having me, Gil.
Thank you, Nick. Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You could track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place so you could stop managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year.